Thanks for introduction. Yeah, when you sent me on this journey, Fermin, preparing this presentation, I wanted to give you, as an audience, the opportunity to read between the lines. The answer why I chose architecture or how I developed as an architect is not one-dimensional to me. It's more like a kind of puzzle. A puzzle of experiences with inspiring places and people. Some of them are here tonight. The will to shape and create and the confidence to believe in decisions is based on trust. Trust in myself, trust to people around me, and the trust of others in me. Let's start the puzzle. When I think of my childhood, the first thing I feel is my mother's love. She deserves to be the initial piece. This is my mother in the 60s in Berlin. And Berlin is not only the place where I live now with my family, but also the place where my parents met. She worked shifts as a nurse in a hospital, and then she and her colleagues, they went out clubbing in the city. They still danced in pairs back then. On the dance floor of Big Eden, the go-to club in Berlin back then, she met an eloquent law student. My father. My father struggled with studying law, and he would have preferred to be a professional musician. Today, he's still passionate about both his work as a lawyer and about music, and he will be 80 years old in 3 days' time. My parents were the so-called 68 generation in Germany during the student movement, centered around Rudi Dutschke in Munich. They were politically active in a German society which, in their eyes, still needed to be freed from the stink of the Nazi generation. Social justice, peace movement, gender equality, and human rights. That were issues that concerned them. Here you see my mother demonstrating for affordable housing, actually, in the Olympic village of Munich. From where I stand now, I can say that my parents and their story somehow teach me to question structures, while at the same time performing at my best in them. Questioning not necessarily to change them against resistance, because this could be very unhealthy for you, but preparing the next step of development, either inside or outside the structure you are in. However, you can have an impact and stay true to yourself. I was born in the 70s in Dortmund, a working class town in the Ruhr area in Western Germany. After 90 years of coal mining, the mines here in Dorsfeld closed in the 60s. The last one in the city of Dortmund closed in the 1990s. The term transformation, which is very often used today, is in fact always contemporary, I guess. It just seems to me now that it's a bit like we would be very anxious at this point to really take measurements to transform. So in these decades of growing up, Dortmund was undergoing what is known a structural change from coal mining to a service-providing economy. This is Luzi. Luzi, der Schrecken der Straße. Some might know that. It's Lucy, the terror of the streets. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, this Czech series was kind of my first role model ever, I would say. Lucy was described as a story from a city child in a middle-class family, and she wanted to belong to a street gang. And her first challenge, she met two clay figures named Friedrich and Friedrich. And yeah, Lucy was a very adventurous child, and she called herself Terror of the Streets and Ruler of the Seas. After my parents separated, or in other words, my mother decided to develop outside the structure of marriage, we, my older sister, my mother and I, we lived in a new housing estate in the shadow of the so-called Hannibal. This is the housing machine of the 70s, in too strong contrast to the cozy mining housing estate around that was carefully built in 1913 by Oskar Schwer. Those offered the miners 2 narrow stories and a garden based on the garden city model. My friends' grandfathers, they had pigeons under the roof and rabbits in the garden. My hardworking mother, who always supported and encouraged me. I think that's actually the greatest treasure I still draw on. The way she looked at me as a child. The security she and my older sister gave me in my early years. With a foundation like that, you can actually go anywhere and do anything, even becoming an architect in Berlin, I guess. Yeah, after starting primary school, I was part of a choir that my class teacher led. A choir for German-Turkish friendship. Dortmund had a high proportion of migrants, the so-called guest workers, many of whom were Turkish, and the purpose of this choir was the idea of bridging the gap between children from different cultural backgrounds. Shared experience as a basis for mutual understanding and social peace. To live free and single like a tree, but in brother and sisterhood like a forest. This longing is ours. Leben einzeln und frei wie ein Baum und geschwisterlich wie ein Wald. Das ist unsere Sehnsucht. Quoting this poem from Nazim Hikmet was part of every performance of us, in Turkish and German. We held hands when we articulated the word forest. We were a group of children with shared experiences on the way to our performances or to the cultural center where we had our rehearsals. Nobody was afraid of each other. I hope that togetherness will continue to play a key role to all of us. I'm convinced that we will have to invest in spaces that promote togetherness, and we as architects will have to contribute with our skills to make place for interaction. I've always been touched by art that provokes interaction. Rikrit Tiravanija, for example, he creates places that elevate eating, making music, or drinking tea to a performance. In this video, you can see my husband with his band playing in a replica of Rikrit's rehearsal room in New York, and our 2 kids are jumping around as well. This exhibition at Gropiusbau is still running until January in Berlin. At this point, I don't want to hide that the fact that my focus on architecture is only possible in this situation while having a family because of my husband's commitment to care work. This reflects the way my family deals with the situation we are in. I hope that future generations of architects won't be forced to take these decisions. my own father was an ambitious every second weekend dad. There wasn't a street festival, museum, theater, castle, or industrial monument in the closer radius that he wouldn't have shown us. That's my older sister and me on a street festival in Dortmund. He showed us that we have access to all of these places. He opened and explained the cultural landscape of the city to us. Living in a city like a child certainly shaped my conviction that urbanity is first and foremost fun and inspiration. That density can be an opportunity if you design and program it carefully, if you respect scale and proportion. During summer holidays, my father took us to many beautiful cities in Europe, like Nantes, Paris, Siena, Florence, and many others. He loved to tell stories about history of each city and the monuments we saw. I remember how we often stood next to each other, like in this picture, both of us seeing our own way, sharing thoughts and sharing a deep passion for discovery and learning, always curious what comes around the next corner. He didn't realize at that time, but that might have been the start for me to see the world as an architect. Seeing the city as collective gestures. In some, you feel that individual design reacts to the context, like houses would listen and talk to each other. And in others, you feel houses are fighting with each other, like the out-of-scale Hannibal with the surrounding housing estate. This is my aunt, my father's sister, and she was a point of orientation for me, as she was someone in our family defining through her profession. And she was talking always enthusiastically about her job as a teacher back then. She lived in Hamburg, and she used to teach in Hamburg and in German schools in Athens and Alexandria. And I learned that it's possible to live as a woman, being really passionate about your job, and your role is defining through your profession more than through your role in a partnership or family. During studying architecture in my hometown Dortmund, I took the decision to move to the east. For me and many other young people from Western Germany, East Germany was, in the 90s, was a place, an exciting world of the unfinished, an adventure playground somehow. I got the chance to visit Jim Whiting's Bimbo Town in Leipzig in a factory hall back then. And this was a place where sculptures were consistently in motion, thanks to compressed air or electric drives. The entire audience is captured by bouncing chairs and floating coats. Everything lives with and from the audience. But how did I get there? It was my best friend, my soulmate, Timmy, living in London now. He was showing me his new old world. As a teenager, he moved to Dortmund in the late 80s, just a few months from the fall of the wall, when his parents' application to leave the country was finally granted. He had a critical perspective on the political system of East Germany and at the same time a great love for the places of his homeland. He drew an exciting, differentiated picture for me and shaped my view and my fascination for East Germany. This is me in my room back then, studying in Dresden. You can see a bed which was designed by myself and built by a friend in Dortmund. You You see the red armchair from a Dortmund hip-hop collective back then, and my jogging shoes on the floor. I used to run along the river of Elbe, you might know. Studying architecture, I never was in doubt that this was the right thing for me, but there was also a kind of discomfort I felt, and I understood that years later when I read the book Black Turtleneck, Round Glasses, you might know, from Karin Hartmann. I really recommend to read it. And I realized that this discomfort of female students in architecture is caused by having a lack of representatives. There are no female professors, and what you are taught is a strictly male canon. But I was lucky. There was a representative when I studied architecture in Dresden. This is Anna Jessen. And Anna Jessen taught us to build with stone, actually. The project was House of Stone at Dresden University, and she took us to the Lauster quarry. And maybe you have been to a quarry. It's really something which is a great feeling to see with how much energy we take this material out of the mountain. You can hear it, you feel the vibrations. And it also shows us the worth of the material and that we shouldn't throw it away. Many years later, I got the chance to finish a huge building in Zurich called Pädagogische Hochschule Zurich. And this is a friend of mine, Britta Fritze, who was responsible for the competition back then at Max Dudler, the office we were both working for. And what I remember is that I was really touched by the trust that Max Dudler and Mark van Kleef put in me to lead this project by the age of 35 back then. And yeah, I think I didn't let their confidence down, and you can see it. I mean, it was a lot of adrenaline in this project, and at the end, pride, as you might see on this photo. There were others that trusted me, and these are Harald Müller and Eva Schad from David Chipperfield Architects. They gave me the opportunity, after working on a project like Montland in Paris, to form a team according to my ideas of design leadership. And my wish was building this interdisciplinary team and to work on sustainable construction together with great structural engineers. And I still think that working very close with structural engineers is still a key to good architecture. About perception. Seeing this mock-up of Montland now and looking how this is built, my perception changed after years, I have to say. I think if I would know what I know now, you just mentioned it, I mean about CO2 emissions, we maybe would have found another way to build it with lower impact, but this was something we were not interested back then. And about perception, this is another art piece from the artist Merlin Bauer from Cologne. And he put this lettering, Liebe deine Stadt, love your city, to the citizens of Cologne on buildings from the 50s. So Cologne is a city which was destroyed in the Second World War, and they have a lot of material and substance, building substance from the 50s. And the citizens don't really value this, and this is kind of statement against demolition for adaptive reuse, for care what you have in your city. And about having layers and using material, I think talking about the circular building issues we are in and our design processes that have to change, I think it might not be something new to us, but it's also a very conservative perception of how you use resources. This is my grandmother in her garden. She came from a gardener family, and in her garden she produced nearly everything she needed. And I think she would have understood this when we are talking now about using what is there. Years later, after some other assignments, I found these impressive founders, Kim Leroux and Margit Sichrowski. And I decided to support their 10-year journey with LXSY to show that excellence in design and circular building, they can go hand in hand. And the work with our clients on great projects we have and the whole team of LXSY, this shows me and it gives me a lot of hope that the best is yet to come. Thank you.
That's such a beautiful picture, actually. You could make a poster out of it, right? Huh?
Yeah.
For Christmas. Thank you for the puzzle. It's so beautiful to get to know you from this perspective. Mm-hmm. You have mentioned, I of course only knew about the professional influences or experiences. And one thing that you mentioned about the office where you worked is that you reached the point when you question how you work and what's the goal is behind the work you do. Mm-hmm. I wonder, which patterns did you recognize or see that you didn't want to continue doing?
Yeah, so one thing I didn't want to continue, and I didn't, because I had the opportunity to really have this team at David Chipperfield Architects. One pattern I didn't want to continue is that there is a certain structure in our larger offices that people take decisions that might not have the chance to get the latest research. And I realized that people working in our office, young people as joining as interns, for example, they come up with ideas and show their ideas and take part as a part of the discussion. And they feel also encouraged to say their opinion. Mm-hmm. And the larger the office and the more famous the office, I had the feeling that people are a bit anxious to do this. And it was actually an intern at David Chipperfield Architects who decided that we go into this direction, building with sustainable construction. It was Rebecca at that time. Mm-hmm. And she said, we have to change. We have to build with timber or with growing resources.
Mm-hmm. And what was the feedback?
We did that. I mean, she told it in a very late stage of a competition. And we decided not to change because I think it was 2 weeks away from when we had to hand in. So we said, okay, but the next project we choose. We take this decision right from the start. We pick the right engineer to do this. And yeah, that was Richard Strauss-Straße, and we won that one.
That's nice. What do you consider? People are happy.
Yeah.
What do you consider you reached the point when you had to reconsider what you do. I wonder, what do you consider now an absolute no-go in the building industry?
An absolute no-go.
No-go.
An absolute no-go. I mean, we as an office, fortunately, we are known for circular building, so we are asked for projects that when clients have the feeling they don't know how to deal with those processes, as they know we have the structure and the people who know how to do that. So fortunately, we are not confronted with those projects where you have the feeling no one cares about. So I think I wouldn't do that anymore.
Mm. And regarding the sustainability, I had in mind something that you said that about it, that it requires, what were the words? It requires, it starts with mindset, courage, and taking risks. And I had to think of, yeah, of course, sounds good, but how many people are up for risk, are open for taking risks, or have the courage to go for it?
Yeah, I can tell you, it's, for example, pension funds. So they are taking the risk, thinking of sustainable building, because they know that the value of sustainable buildings, they will rise in time. Okay. And they are not interested to invest now in buildings where they know in 20 years they are nothing worth. And I think it's not a risk anymore for now, as we know that due to ESG criteria, it is necessary to change. So I think it's more, let's say, some of our colleagues as well that have to change, because I think it's also a feeling of you have done things for decades which are not good for the future. You know, I think it's a feeling of shame somehow, and it's very difficult from a feeling of shame to be really passionate about something. Yeah. So I think this is the reason why.
Well, you were well known for buildings, right? Or you had got a kind of well-known practice and some very many awards and recognition for something that is not maybe the way that should be built today, right? That you go in that direction, that things have changed. You said you saw a picture of something built in concrete that you say we wouldn't do it today, right?
I think maybe we would have built it in concrete. Maybe this would have been the right material in this case still, but maybe we would have invested more time in trying to find putting something in, for example, so you don't have to spend as much concrete as we did. I think you would just think in another way about it, but I think we didn't 10 years ago, no.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing. Time is almost over. Maybe we quick reply to the question, what do you consider your biggest challenge? I mean, you have been in different practices, you're now in a new adventure with a new office. In your professional life, what has been your biggest challenge and what was your takeaway from that?
So the challenges in future, you mean?
No, that you had, the hardest moment.
Challenge I had. Biggest challenge I had. I think the biggest challenge I had was last 3 years finding a place to stay. And I think, I found it now.
Yeah.
Because
you had a good background.
Yeah, of course. But with this background, you also set a certain standard, or you are known for large projects, you know, and then you know how to handle them and to lead huge teams. And finding a place where I had the feeling this is really my purpose, this was a kind of challenge to me. Sure. And I'm happy that it worked out.
And it's also happy for you because it is possible to change, right? Sometimes things are like, okay, we have been working for a well-known practice for 15 years. How dare I to think of other things? You have also a battle regarding the fair pay of Hawaii. Is that correct? So kind of you kind of express your opinion. Yeah. What should be changed? Can you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting seeing so many people here, and I guess there are a lot of architects around. And I also work as a board member for the Architects Chamber, and of course one of our topics is discussing about our fees and our contracts. And every time I ask people engaging in this and taking part of the Architects Chamber, and even if it's only 4 days in a year to be member of the, let's say, parliament of the Architects Chamber in Vertreterversammlung, it's always a matter of time that people say it's not possible for me. I have no time about that. And I mean, there are so many topics we discuss, and we have a direct contact to politicians to discuss about it. And yeah, I wonder that you are so successful with an evening like this, people hearing stories of architects, but things where we can really change our framework is something that is obviously not interesting enough. Sorry.
But fair pay is interesting. Tell us about that. We want fair pay. But you had a fight regarding fair pay, or you want to change that? That it is right? Or
we had, of course, in the Architects Chamber, we are discussing that in future architectural services, they will change. I mean, if you look deeper into existing buildings and into circular building, it might change that the part of architects' work in proportion to our building costs, that might differ than it was in the last decades, because we didn't care so much about with the existing building and how we build, which kind of material is it. So our services, they expand. And I'm not a fan of giving those services to consultant firms. So I think it's really an architect's work we are doing.
Yeah, well, fair pay, it's always a topic. And not only for like how an office is getting paid for a project, but also how people in the team are being paid. But maybe we can discuss it later. Wiebke, it was such a nice puzzle, and we appreciate that you were on a stage with us. Thank you for that, and later we will have a conversation all together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you a lot.